Hi folks, I'm Dave Rothrock. I'm here with John Kolb today. We're going to be discussing a little bit more in depth the drop shot rig. We've had a number of comments and obviously then questions on the first video. We've had a really great response. It was interesting because I've literally got emails from around the world on this subject, so it's definitely something that a lot of fly fishers are thinking about. Now, when you think about the drop shot rig, obviously this has us placing our weight below on another piece of mono attached to our leader. That's going to actually be below the nymphs. And that means what's going to be bouncing on the bottom is the weight. That's what we want. Why do we want that? For the simple reason that when we've got our flies set up like I set them up, and that's off of a dropper tag, we literally have the ability to place that fly, that bottom fly, when we're using two flies, at approximately 3 inches above the substrate. That's right about where the snout of a trout might be when they're holding on the bottom, waiting for some food item or some item that might appeal to their curiosity to drift by, so that they might in fact then intercept that item. Now, when we have a real shallow angle of drift with a sighter system, that means that we can have that weight a little bit further down that final piece of mono to ensure that our fly is drifting at the depth we want it, or the amount of distance we want it up from that average depth of that substrate. So we have that ability to make that adjustment. If we're fishing a more steep angle of drift, then obviously that weight is going to be a little bit closer to that fly. So I start out with, if I'm fishing a shallow angle of drift, having that weight approximately 8 inches below that knot. Steeper angle of drift, I'm going to go up and get it somewhere about 6 inches away from that bottom blood knot. That begs the question. We're attaching split shot to this leader. There are other folks out there that will advocate setting it up a bit different. Some of them will actually tie a weight at the very bottom of that last section of leader. The problem there is, number one, we cannot adjust the location of that weight on that bottom piece of material. The other thing is, to me, one of the great advantages of a drop shot system is that since it's the weight that generally hangs up. Now, don't get me wrong, wood loves hook points, or should I say hook points love wood. When we have that weight hung up, if you have no knot, or if you have that weight only placed on there as we do with a split shot, then that can actually slide off if we can't disconnect from where it's caught in the substrate. I'd much rather lose split shot than flies. I prefer the Orvis non-toxics. They're round and their coating is a bit harder. So those are two benefits I believe you get out of using the Orvis split shot. I like to keep short droppers. Now, what do I mean by short? Usually no more than about 3 inches from the blood knot. And that means that I'll probably be able to get no more than 2 other flies tied once I want to go and change flies. I might as well stop here and say, why blood knots versus surgeon knots? That's easy. A blood knot gives me a 90-degree angle from which that dropper tag comes out. Surgeon's knots either have an upward angle or a downward angle. To me, it puts that a little bit too close to my main tippet, and that's why I choose a blood knot over a surgeon's knot. If you prefer otherwise, that's fine and dandy. It's whatever trips your trigger here, folks, because you want to have confidence in what you're doing and what you're using. But a shorter dropper tag means less tangles. And I see very few tangles in reality when I'm fishing. Every once in a while, what's going to happen is I'm going to have the top fly and the bottom fly somehow find each other and connect hook bends. That'll happen every once in a great while. But that's about the only way I'm going to really see a tangle. So to me, the shorter the dropper, the less potential you have for anything wrapping around and really causing a problem. that's going to obviously take away from fishing time, since we're going to have to correct that problem. So that's why I go with much shorter dropper tags. Now, one of the things too is you heard me say that I fish a leader. That means I'm not fishing an all mono system. I prefer to have a fly line. Now, if my leader is somewhere in the vicinity of 20 feet long from where it's attached to my fly line down to my weight, that's pretty long. Now, two, when you think about that, it's not just the fact that I like the feel of a fly line. It's I like the versatility that goes along with using a fly line to change quickly, to adapt to changing stream conditions. What are those stream conditions that might make me change? Well, that's easy. If I'm fishing nymphs and all of a sudden I see a bunch of fish starting to rise, I'm going to look at the possibility of fishing dries. I need to be able to go ahead and cut off my nymphs. If I have to attach a thinner piece of tippet material to accommodate the fact that I'm going to fish a small fly, that's fine. But that's not something that's going to take me a long time. So I'm going to be back in the game as quickly and as effectively as I possibly can. That's versatility. And that's important to me when I'm out on the water. What happens when I'm to the point that I need to switch back to nymphs? Well, it's not going to take me a whole heck of a lot. A lot of times what I've done is I've cut everything off, put it in a box, I pull my box out, I reattach that, and I'm ready to fish nymphs again. So it's, some would say perhaps not quick change, but it's awfully close. Some folks talk about the ethics. And you know, in reality, when they do that, especially if they seem to focus in on drop shotting, it's pretty much applicable to nymph fishing in general. Some people say we're not fly fishing, we're bait fishing. Well, in reality, isn't a dry fly a form of bait? So when it comes to being ethical or less ethical or more ethical, fly fishing is fly fishing. Now, there's no question that some states have actually outlawed drop shot systems, and there's a reason for that. There's this thing, unfortunately, that enters into the equation called abuse. And there have been times in the past, from what I've been told and what I've read, that a form of drop shotting has actually been abused to the point that people would use it to be able to get weight down below the hook, find something that's going to interrupt that drift that they believe is a fish, and try to snag that fish. That is not only unethical, it's also illegal. And as far as I know, that's illegal across the board. It's just that a number of states have not actually declared it illegal and made a regulation banning the use of drop shot systems. So it's legal here in Pennsylvania. It's something you want to check before you might want to consider setting yourself up to use a drop shot system. Now, two, there's always a question, are we even fly fishing because of the fact we really don't cast nymphs? Well, we don't cast nymphs. Any weight is not really cast, it's lobbed. Anybody tells you that you throw a loop when you nymph fish, there are some of us who do, but for the most part, we're not going to. We're going to be throwing with a really open loop so that that weight doesn't go back behind us, hit that sudden stop as we stop that cast and go to reverse direction. When you do that with weight, that can be a problem because you cannot control where and what that weight is going to cause things to happen behind you. And it's the same thing as you make that forward cast. Once you make that cast, if you try to keep a tight loop, there's that shock at the end of that cast. And again, we can't guarantee what's going to happen there or where it's going to go. So we are not casting. There's no question about that. We're lobbing for the most part. And anybody tells you otherwise, they really need to take a good hard look at what we're doing when we cast weight, especially when we're dealing with a lot of current and a lot of depth, because the more weight, the more important it is to not cast with a tighter loop. So that's something to consider as well with regard to our presentation. when we have all of this set up, if I fish nothing but 4X and I don't fish anything lighter than 4X, having really invested a lot of time trying to analyze what goes on in the drift when we're actually drifting nymphs through the water column, I've concluded for myself that, to me, there's no obvious advantage in going lighter. Now, I know some folks will say lighter diameter material descends through the water column more quickly and easily. I'm sorry, but I can't see that really happening with only about a 2,000 diameter difference. And that being the case, you know, I'd much rather think about perhaps using just a smidgen more weight to get my system down. I celebrated, I hate to use that term, 50 years of fishing nymphs this past January. And I've still got a lot to learn. I readily admit that. But I went through that period of time in my life that I would say at least 40 to 50% of my nymphing was done with 6X Tippet material. I don't see any advantage of that over 4X now that I'm fishing only 4X.
So that's your first tag. So how low are your drop shots? But
right now, my closest one is about 8 inches away. And like I say, depending on the angle that I'm going to plan for drift, I'll move them up to about within 6 inches of this blood knot. And I go by the blood knot, not where the fly is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then your second tag.
My second tag
about
is
12 inches.
Yeah, that's probably a little bit more than 12 right now, but that's as far as away I want my flies.
So from your second tag up to your sighter, how much distance is that?
Well, this is 5 feet. Right there. So I have 5 feet plus about, I'm going to say, another 7 or so inches to my sighter. So I've got probably a little over 5.5 feet to my sighter.
And that's 4X.
My sighter is OX. I have this short section of 2X for good energy transfer. And then I go into my Tippet, which is 4X. Cortland's yellow is good.
Okay.
I would be using Cortland's yellow if I didn't have this. Now you get to keep in mind too, I have 2 sighters. So I can handle deeper water. And that, yes, that means I have larger diameter material and 1 sighter submerged, but it works.
If you like this video, I'm going to post a link in the comments section to Dave's first video. It has been my best performing fly fishing video, so people really like the content on the drop shot rig. Dave also runs a blog. It's called The Ranting Angler. I'll put a link to that as well. He's providing phenomenal content in the blog. It's all free. He could be charging for it, but he just loves to share his knowledge and help others learn to fly fish. He goes over his formula, his leader formula, in one of those posts, so I will post to that blog, but it's therantingangler.com. Thanks again for watching. Make sure you check out the other drop shot video and subscribe and share this with a fellow fly fisher. Thank you.